28, 1997, before the evening of the local Jewish artists by Morton Baslaw.
Back row over there. Can you hear me plainly? And what about over here, Sheila? Okay. If there is difficulty, then we'll bring in the PA system. But Mark doesn't like the PA system, and where's Mark? Can't start the meeting without Mark. Well, anyways, we'll start. First of all, I'd like to. The president of the Lazear, Lawrence Greenberg, was just in the room a few minutes ago, and he asked me to bring greetings on behalf of the VOD to the association, which we appreciate because you'll hear some of my comments in a few minutes' time. This is to association members, I've got good news and kind of bad news. The good news tonight is that the archives of the Ottawa Jewish Historical Society will be moving into the new JCC campus on Broadview. Preliminary discussions have been taking place all spring, primarily since March the 3rd of 97, and the preliminary plan was approved by the JCC and the CDC, which is the Community Development Committee, and the VOD of our layout for the new proposed facilities on Broadview. This has been a lot of work on behalf of your board, and plus members of the special committee that has worked for about 2.5 to 3 months. And I want to specifically thank, at this time, Shirley Berman, Elliot Gluck, Dr. Marcus Hotz, Maury Connick, and Gedalia Rosenfeld, who worked laboriously with yours truly in order to achieve our goal. That is the good news. The not so good news means that we have a lot more work to do with the VOD. And this is, I'm not going to go into detail. A lot of this is going to be foreign even to our own members. But in 1996, April of 1996, the VOD Board of Directors and the Ottawa Jewish Historical Board of Directors finalized the terms of reference regarding differences between the VOD and the Ottawa Jewish Historical Society with regards to the archives, at which point, in April of 1996, a consultant was appointed. Numerous deadlines had passed with regards to the consultant's report, and specifically 3 deadlines elapsed in May of this year, 1997. The report has never been submitted to the VOD, and therefore it means that negotiations have to start. As of Monday of this week, we have written the VOD, President of the VOD, Lawrence Greenberg, and requested that a committee of the VOD meet with the committee of the Ottawa Jewish Historical Society with regards to the archives. And we've set deadlines that the report should be finalized plus or minus 8th or 9th of August, so that it could go to both the boards of directors of both the Ottawa Jewish Historical Society and the VOD, which would culminate in an agreement by the end of October. Now, I don't want to go into any details. I'm not going to ask you for any questions. Only to say this, that a board of directors meeting, those directors are here, are being called for 9:30 next Thursday, a week from tomorrow, in our offices at 151 Chapel Street. It will be a long meeting, lots on the agenda, and those golfers that are supposedly going to golf, forget about the afternoon because it's a long meeting, and lunch will be served if necessary. With regards to future meetings, on June the 22nd, Gerald Lando will speak about the Lando and Epstein families. On Sunday, September the 14th, there will be a meeting or a paper presented on the Kardish family. And in October or early November, as I've been informed by Elliot Gluck is preparing a set of meetings, one to transpire in October, early November of this year, another one for May on the Year of the Women. More so will be submitted to you in our monthly bulletins. It will basically be given by a group of women speakers on each woman talking about a member of the woman of the Ottawa Jewish community, an outstanding woman of the Ottawa Jewish community of past years. I wanted just to remind everybody that Sam Edelson is in the corner of the table, ready to take your applications or your membership dues. And I want to pay specific thanks to Elaine Brodsky on my left, your right, for laying this layout here tonight. It's somewhat of a different format, different from what we normally have, but basically between she and Morton Baslaw, we've come together on something that pleased Morton's desires. Also, thanks to Shirley Berman, who held Morton's hand through the negotiations culminating in this evening. Without further ado, I have nothing further to say at this moment, but I'd like to bring forward Dr. Marcus Hotz, who will introduce the speaker. And I'm not a member of the union, but I'm removing the podium for the time being.
I must say that when Lawrence asked me to introduce Morton, the first thought that came into my mind was why? Surely, of all people in this town, the one who needs no introduction whatsoever must be Morton Baslaw. Although he's had a very interesting life, and I think we can all, those of us who know him well, can well afford to listen to it being recounted once again. He was, of course, born in Ottawa, and his first, I suppose, introduction to the realities of life came when he served in the Royal Canadian Air Force. Leaving the Air Force, he studied at the Chicago Academy of Fine Art. And when he graduated from that institution, since he graduated from that institution, he has, of course, become a nationally known, recognized painter of watercolor landscapes. Now, he's worked in all kinds of places. In Canada, of course, in Saint-Pierre and Miquelon, the French islands, Mexico, France, and Italy. And his work is represented in many, many collections, both private and public, right across this country. And not only this country, but in others too, in the United States, in Israel, and Germany, and elsewhere. As well as galleries right across this country. His works are also in a number of permanent collections in the city of Ottawa, and art galleries too. He's also shown a keen interest in artistic affairs, and he was a member of the Ontario Society of Artists, the Canadian Society of Painters in Watercolor, and was the founding president of the Ottawa Watercolor Society. His work, of course, has been frequently represented at their exhibitions. He also has not lost track of education and the need for educating younger, upcoming artists. He is past president of the Ottawa School of Art, and he continues to teach at the Ottawa School of Art. He's also taught at Algonquin College over the years, and at the Ketico Centre in Northern Ontario. Well, enough said. Why listen to me when you can listen to Morton Baslaw himself?
predicted that 7 people would show up. This is scary. Also, Maya and Yuchen Baldwin presented me with these flowers, which I will represent to Sheila for putting up with me. My normal tendency for speaking is winging it, and as a result, I don't do so good. So, you can say what you want to say out of it. It says here, ladies and gentlemen, but sincerely, I wish to thank Lawrence Friedman, President, and Shirley Berman, Executive Director, and my new friend, Elaine Brodsky. As an interjection, when I was studying in Chicago, one of my landlords, where I stayed in their room in their house, was named Brodsky. No relation, I don't think. All for making this evening possible. It has given us an opportunity to have you meet several Ottawa Jewish artists who will show you the samplings of their art and talk to you about their work and aspirations. And I can tell you, certainly from my experience, this is not usual, because most people really don't know the artists whose work they look at or see. The range of their schoolings, their exhibitions, their patrons, and their earned recognitions in major Canadian art societies is most impressive. And we hope that you will enjoy the format of this evening. And if you don't, I will burst into tears. I also hope, in light of the fact that there are so many talented Jewish men and women artists of Ottawa, that this evening can become the catalyst for many more evenings such as this. And if it doesn't happen, it's Lawrence Friedman's fault. You can't hear? Hello. You can't, should I start over? No. I'm pleased to introduce 3 of the Tarantour sisters, Debbie, Mirsky, Cosman, and myself, which has already been done. So, the format, ooh, geez, will be based on the fact that art is a free-form expression and really shouldn't be structured. Like that. And you can tell your joke after all. Boy. But the first will be Sonia Tarantour Pearl. She is an associate of the Ontario College of Art, the Ontario Society of Artists, a fellow, I could never figure that out, a fellow, of the Ottawa Watercolor Society, and now a member of the Canadian Society of Painters in Watercolor. That just happened, eh? Very difficult to get in. These societies accept probably no more than 1 or 2 artists a year. Good, I told you. She has exhibited locally, nationally, and internationally. Her works are held in several collections, including the Government of Canada, the City of Ottawa, and the Saskatoon Gallery and Conservatory. Sonia is an award-winning artist working in mixed media, watercolor plus fabric banners. Her interpretations of landscape focus on experimentation, process, and transition. And there's an addendum here, it says abridged biography. Now, in order to have her talk about her work, nice to have you.
Yes, okay. Sure, no, I'm reporting.
Can we rehearse this?
Carry this now? Okay. All right. It's a privilege to be here tonight. Before I start talking about my work, I just wanted to introduce a bit of history. Something about my forebears, some of them. The person who started all this on my maternal side was my grandmother. Her name was Idan Nozick. Hayahana was her Yiddish name. Can you hear now? Sorry. Okay? All right. Her name was Hayahana, and she was the matriarch of all our talent. The matriarch, even though she only lived to 26. Despite her short time on earth, she was a powerhouse, and her potency has reached down through 3 generations. For example, her great-great-granddaughter, Natalie Gelman, is here tonight, and she just won the art prize for grade 10 in her high school. Our bond to her and her influence and her thread has reached down to all her grandchildren, great-grandchildren, and great-great-grandchildren. Her daughter, my mother Sylvia, our mother Sylvia, was a refined and gracious woman and extremely sensitive. She taught us how to paint with enamel paint onto plates, and this we did by the light of a kerosene lamp on a farm. Her gift to us was loving to do our skills, and this gift was to keep us supported through life. On my father's side, my paternal grandfather, Charles, was a horse trader in Russia, and I wish I had some of his savvy. At one time, he smuggled in a cartload of loaves of bread, and he helped feed the village. It was called Galbanyask. He was one of 5 brothers and the only one that managed to get his family over to this continent. The rest were sent to Siberia and never heard of again. So that when I feel myself sinking, I just remind myself that I'm a descendant from survivors, and I know all of us are this in the room. My father, Morris, was the only practicing Jew in Maniwaki. He was called Maurice Tarantour. He could fix almost anything. Not aesthetically pleasing, but he could fix it. At our family cottage, we have kept his tool shed intact like an art installation, and I personally still use his tools. He was an outdoorsman, and by the age of 5, he had all of us fishing and shooting a .22 rifle. I can still hear our mother saying, Maurice, because he used to also take us on his horse and leap over the fences with us clinging and screaming. From him, I have kept his passion for nature and his inventiveness, and it's in my work. My parents, our parents, Sylvia and Morris, contributed in their way to the early Ottawa culture, and they nurtured in us a love of beauty and a pride in our Jewish heritage. Morton said to me, I want you to talk off the cuff, so the reason he was pointing to me is that he read from notes, and I left all of mine at home, and my mouth is very dry. Anyhow, now for the visual part of it. Many think that artists sit in a field of daisies and that we wait for inspiration. And I thought I'd tell you some of the lengths that I've gone to. Last winter, I was in a state of total withdrawal. I wanted to go out sketching. It was early winter. And I drove to Almont, to the rapids. But it started to blizzard. So the elements won. I turned around and went home. The next day I went back, brought my beach umbrella, perched under a tree. And I was very happy. It was snowing around me and I was protected, and I thought, I must be a real artist. It's wonderful to be so driven. Thank you. Until the wind picked up the umbrella and started blowing into the rapids. It caught on a branch. I tied it to the chair, and I continued. And it was working well until I stood up. Then the wind picked up the umbrella and the chair. So I continued by holding the pole like this, and for another hour I worked. Then the cramps and chills set in. And I decided to finish the work at home. Another time, someone sent me on a wild goose chase to Fitzroy Harbor Provincial Park, and I got locked in. Teena said it could only happen to me. A few years ago, I painted 3 sheets with color energy spirals, and I decided that I wanted a video of them blowing from the trees of the experimental farm. So my 2 nieces, Linda and Ellen, took their days off, and we went to the experimental farm, carried the ladder and the lines and the pieces and the cameras, and spent the morning hoisting them. And had a lot of fun, got our videos, and chose to ignore the scrutiny of the security guard that was watching us from the highway, because it was a special day. Usually, I travel with 30 pounds of gear on my back. Maybe I better have a sip of this. I travel with 30 pounds of gear on my back. When I'm on a painting excursion, I take about an hour to 2 hours, 2 to 3 hours driving to and from, with 45 minutes to an hour to set up, hike, and then take it down. If I'm lucky, I'll get in 2 to 3 hours solid work. Last year, I schlepped my way up the mountain past Aylmer to my mountain stream. Except the black flies won this time, and I schlepped it all the way back down the mountain. Had to pack it in. Maybe I'll start talking. Last year in the winter, the end of winter, I was painting with, holding this, this has no bearing on it. I was painting in Charlevoix, Quebec with a group of artists. And since I was closer to the Maritimes and had not been there, Adrian, my daughter, came down by bus, and together we went down to the Bay of Fundy. It was too early, and the park was barricaded. It didn't stop the bear we saw. But fortunately in St. John's, I heard about a very remote cape that wasn't even on the map. And this was the place. So we started heading up the road, and it looked just like it was out of the Wizard of Oz, except that it was red instead of yellow. And when we found this place, it was a primordial, wonderful place. It was all red rocks, red cliffs, except for the ocean. But it was the end of the day, so we found a bed and breakfast, which was very lucky, and they had a chart with the tides on it, and we knew that the tide would be up here at 11 a.m. the next morning, so we were there at 7:45. Adrian stood guard, and I raced the tide for 2 hours, and it was very exciting to hear the waves getting louder and closer. place had a powerful stillness to it. And the link with that in some of my earlier work was that I felt like I was entering another place and breaking through some of the barriers. And this is called Cave and Rage. It's in New Brunswick. A couple of summers ago, a friend and I went camping. It was my first camping experience, and she said to me, "Let's leave the tents and go for a walk because there's a rock I want you to see." Now, this was Bon Echo, and before it became a public campground, it was sacred ground. It was native sacred ground. When I saw this rock, this is only a small part of it. It had a pink light on it. It was the end of the day. The sun was hitting it, and I was extremely moved. A month later, I came back to camp on my own, but this time I had my sailboard with paddles, I had my camera in a Ziploc bag, and I went off to get reference. Sometimes, although I like to work at the source, that's my first love, I'm forced to use photographs for reference. But then I have the leisure to go with it. Now I have the luxury of a canoe. When I paddle across this lake, it's called Mazenot Rock. The scale of it, the magnificence of it is extremely powerful. And I like to drift by the reflections, by the markings on them, and it's intoxicating to take in the scale, the texture, the lichen, the color. I always do honor to the pictograph artists, the native spirits that are there, and I like to think that if they were drifting by my doors at Temple Israel, that they would give me the same compliment. I've done 2 paintings in this series, and I've done 2 wall hangings, which I call painted tapestries. This painting down here is near Plaisance. My daughter, Adrienne, for a while was kayaking and in a class, and when she showed me her snapshots, I was so impressed with the scenery that I just had to go there, so she brought me there. This involved driving down back roads, across a farmer's field, down a gully, hiking through woods. I'm very careful about safety, so I don't go there alone. I always wait for company. I've done 3 paintings from this series. The first one is in my son Bennett's collection in Toronto. It was extremely labored. The second one, almost as important as his collection, is in the diploma collection with the Canadian Society of Painters in Watercolor. It's such a mouthful, Morton. No wonder it's so hard to be a member. That one was a little easier coming to me. This is the third and the softest one. The last one I did before this one took 3 tries. It rained the first time, snowed the second time, and I had it completed at home. This one I did in one shot because sometimes it's like learning to play the piano and practice, and it just gets a little looser. Being an artist involves balancing. First, there's a response to something, a resonance. The challenge is to take this and translate it 2-dimensionally and capture the essence of it. I have to call upon and at the same time forget about 59 years of experience because I don't want the technical virtuosity to crowd out the meaning. It's about, I consider 1 in 7 of my paintings are successful. Many of them I end up papering over, and some of them have as much as 3 paintings under them. Just keep covering them and painting over them. Some of them I tear apart and I reconstitute into a mixed media and then rework them. There's also a balance between my love of abstraction and my love of realism. A balance between hearing the voices of people out there and keeping true to myself and my progress and my process. This has rarely happened to me, but only 3 times have I had the feeling of truly having that flow that comes when I'm letting go of the control and I'm just allowing things to go through me. And when that happens, it's effortless and it's a wonderful feeling. And I keep it in my heart. But the rest of the time I have to labor like everybody else. This painting is a work in progress. 2 autumns ago I was scouting through Algonquin Park in my car, and through the trees I saw something, and I had to get closer, so I parked the car and found this, behind the trees I found this wonderful cliff. So take another. It's all your fault, Morton. I found this wonderful cliff with an amazing presence. Again, I had to use photographs. The first time I painted it, it was very soft and too pale. The second time I worked and passed over it, it was too gaudy. So I took it in the backyard, I hosed it all off, and I put it away for a year. Took it out again. This time I usually go top to bottom. I don't know why, maybe I'm Asian in my background. And as you can see, it was too dark. So I started making my 4th pass with white. Now if you have more than 10% of white in your work, it's no longer a watercolor, it's now a mixed media. And some purists don't even use watercolor. I haven't reached that stage yet. You can see where I've gone down to here and heading this way. I'll take it as far as it goes, but probably I'll end up doing it again in on another support, another interpretation. I like to do it as a wall hanging. I've left this till last because I feel that I'm also a work in progress. Every shift in my life has affected my work. I may never be able to achieve the masterpiece that I'd like to be in my life or achieve in my work. However, if I could have the grace to just let things unfold as they're meant to be, I'd be happy with that. Thank you.
Pretty good, eh? The next mini-biog is Anne Tarantour Lazear. Where are you, Anne? Anne is a sister of the most artistic family of Sonia and Teena. She paints portraits, still lifes, and landscapes. Her favorite medium is oils. Oils. Anne and her husband Art held, and this is incredible because I never knew this. Anne and her husband Art, where are you, Art? Held the first husband and wife Jewish art show in Canada. She taught for 27 years for the Ottawa Board of Education, social studies at the 7th and 8th grades, as well as art in high schools. Since her retirement in 1988, Anne has returned to paintings, and we would like you to come up now.
I'll shout. Yeah, that'll be great. What do I do with this?
what you're
Can I put it over here?
Yeah, fine, fine.
Uh,
No, you're not talking about it now.
No?
It's in there, it's in there.
Let me see if I can.
Yeah, that's fine. I just want to make sure everyone, can they hear me with this? Here it is. You can hear it? Okay, I have a very soft voice, just when I get mad. I'd like to commend the Jewish Historical Society under the capable management of Ms. Gorman and Mr. Friedman for their valuable work and the opportunity they've given me to speak to all of you. I know so many of you. Please bear with me. I've written this 10 times. I left my glasses at home. I'll start doing it now. And these are our works over here. And perhaps while I'm talking, you can look at the work, and if you can't see them, perhaps you can see them after. Thank you. Afterwards. It is fitting that I should be speaking at this synagogue, the God of Israel, for it was 30 years ago, in 1968, that I exhibited a work of art along with other artisans for the affiliate. An address written by, and I have the little booklet that went out by the affiliate at that time, and perhaps you'd like to have it as a reference material. An address written by me entitled The Beauty Within was delivered by Mrs. Ross Dresker. It seems appropriate at this time, and I'd like to read it to you. 1968. The Hebrew people have for centuries been aware of the beauty to be found in their own heritage and customs. From earliest times, the Talmudic saying, "This is my God and I will adorn him," was faithfully followed. Haggadahs, plates, and crowns for scrolls were painstakingly fashioned from precious metals. With the new liberalism in theology, the second commandment, which forbade making any matter of likeness of anything that is in heaven above or that is in the earth beneath, had a new meaning. Artists, like the scientists around them, began to search in museums, archives, and libraries for more information about their history. However, wars, pestilence, floods, and ignorance had depleted these few precious works of art. Thus, Jewish artists desired to keep before them and future generations those things which they considered precious, burst forth with new vigor in many lands. Max Liebermann in Germany, William Zorach in America, Joseph Israels in the Netherlands, Camille Pissarro in France, Jacob Epstein in England. There was a resurgence of creativity in the Bezalel School of Arts in Israel. Private collectors, such as Mr. Mendel of Saskatoon, purchased the works of Jewish painters, such as Marc Chagall and Pissarro. The Canadian Jewish Congress sponsored an exhibition of contemporary works by Canadian Jewish artists in the Montreal Museum of Fine Arts in October the 29th, 1959. Among them represented were William Raphael, Eva Bayevsky, Gita Kaiserman, Lily Freeman, Anne Kahane, and Louis Milstock. In the last few years, the Ottawa community has had several successful art shows. A love, a talent, a thirst must continue to be instilled in ourselves and our youth for our heritage. Hebrew work of art, created by the dwellers therein or by professional artists, should be in each home. Thus our youth will grow up with a pride in their heritage, and no sect, no nation, no person will deface, distort, or destroy that beauty within. And that was written 30 years ago. And I feel the same way today. 11 years before this address, however, in 1956, my husband Art and I held the first husband and wife Jewish art show in Canada, as was mentioned by Morton. We appreciate that. It was held at the Odeon Theatre in Ottawa. Scribbling on the side here. Opening the exhibition was Rabbi Samuel Burstein of your synagogue, Agudath Israel, and Father Demers, representing His Excellency Monseigneur Lemieux. You heard that our father came from Maniwaki, and there was always intercultural management or between all the religions. There were 19 paintings of prayer shawls, market scenes, and a grandfather's picture, great-grandfather, which is now in the home of Philip and Norma Lazear. They were in a variety of styles, from abstract to realism. It came at a time when the government of Canada was to ship planes to Israel's enemies in the Middle East. Our exhibit was featured along with the protest demonstrations taking place at the ports in the evening news. Happily, the shipment was eventually stopped. Our exhibition was well received by the media and the public. These paintings over here are several from the show, and they're the courtesy of our children Ellen and Sam Gelman, Linda and Murray Greenberg, Stuart and Lillian Lazear. The middle painting over here, if you can turn your seats, I'm sorry. Can you see it? Okay. The middle painting depicts some members of the Agudath Jesuit Congregational Choir. They are left to right David Toronto, Meyer Wexler, who's in our audience tonight, Warner Bauer, Reverend Joseph Rabin, Normie Shoyet, Shea Sager, Howard Karp, and Bernard Schinder. They held a prominent position in our synagogue, and we enjoyed hearing their voices during the high holidays. I painted a single portrait of Cantor Joseph Rabin, and when he came to our home and donned his white robes, my son Stuart, who was only 6 years old at the time, looked up at him and said, "Are you God?" Cantor Rabin was indeed an amazing man. His portrait was in his late daughter's Esther Bilski's home. The wedding, as you see over here, is of our nuptials at Agudath Jesuit, now the Memorial Chapel. It is a special theme in Jewish art and painted by past artists like Joseph Israels of the Netherlands. It is interesting to note that a huppah is now being sewn by the Jewish Artists League. And all the sisters, Sonia, Teena, Selma, myself, are involved, along with these other dedicated women, some of which are in the audience tonight. How many are you here? Malka. Yes, and that's great. You'll be seeing it soon. That was also exhibited during the Israeli Day here at Agudath Israel. The painting named The Bread and the Candlestick right over here. The challah is from Kurdish bakeries. And the brass candelabra, they fed us all, always. And the brass candelabra from Mark's mother, Mrs. Lazear, Baslaw. It represents the sustenance we need for our bodies and the faith we need for our souls. The current painting, the latest over here, is a portrait of Cantor Shyatt, your Cantor Shyatt. He used to be our Cantor Shyatt. And it brings almost to a full circle this theme of religious art, parts of my art. I enjoyed his melodic voice and the prayers, and he graciously allowed me to take this picture in his robes. The white covered scroll and the white curtains lend a purity to the scene, while the gold covered Torah scrolls in the ark lend warmth. I think Cantor Shyatt is with us tonight. I did see him, and I was very grateful that you allowed me to do that. A pride in heritage, country, and family I learned from my father, as Sonia was saying in her beautiful speech. I'm so proud of her. Proud of all my sisters. I'm proud of my family. I'm proud of and sensitivity to the beauty of things and people around us from our mother. Like Martin Luther King, I have a dream that the beauty of our heritage will be seen by everyone. My husband Art encouraged me in my portrait painting, saying I could capture a likeness. Thus, in May 1957, I painted a portrait of Dr. Maxwell McCodrum. He's the former president of Carleton College, University, and it's now displayed in the library that bears his name. This here is the painting of Tarantour, which many of you might have seen. And this is the painting of Maxwell McCodrum. That was my alma mater. Thank you. That gave me a breather. Okay. Since my retirement, I haven't been doing any public speaking. As a teacher, I did a lot of talking. Then after this, I had a one-woman show. And I followed this with winter scenes, as you can see over here. I painted the snow in a novel fashion. I wanted to be original. For I wish to convey the feeling of movement. The buildings and the dwellings were drawn in short diagonal lines, with also the flakes of snow. The pigment is applied thickly, and if a strong light is shone on the canvas from the side, it appears three-dimensional. Perhaps when you go up, you'll be able to see that. In 1961, I entered the teaching profession and took great joy in the creative achievements of my students in social studies, and some of the parents are here. Mr. and Miss Green, I enjoyed your sons. They were marvelous. We've documented in all of the York News. This was grade 8. It was wonderful years. Then I went into high school, and there I taught art. Abstracts, design, sculpture, drawing, painting, and art history. And in it, I never felt I would fail anyone, and I never did. They all did well. They all got A's. They deserved it. As president of the Ottawa Public School Women Teachers Association, we work for quality education, and the battle still goes on. Upon retirement, I wrote of my pupils' enterprises in a booklet entitled Reach for the Heights. Copies were sent to all the trustees, and slides accompanied the booklet for use in the schools. It was a winning process for me, for I had enjoyed my 27 years of teaching. And here's the little booklet, Reach for the Heights. And in it, many of the enterprises were just sort of documented. So it was a fun time. There's sculptures. Perhaps you'd like to look at it afterwards. Recently, Art, my husband, and I had our second husband and wife show after all these years. His watercolor studies of golf scenes showed his great assurance and skill. He's amazing, and it would take a book to tell of all the things he's done. Many of you know of his artistry right now. I chose to paint another season, the fall this time, as I had done previously with winter. This time, emphasizing the sumac, and you can see it behind Stewie. This plant radiates with color. Thank you. It dies in the winter and is reborn in the spring. Its red berries stay on the stalk late into the winter and give sustenance to many birds. Silhouettes of fossilized plants have been preserved in prehistoric rock. It is an eternal plant whose red pods and branches reach ever up to the sky. Their foliage was painted against fields, cliffs, and water, and that is just one example. My husband will be showing his recent works at the Lazear on June the 1st. Our children are creative in many fields. Our steward is a heritage planner with the City of Ottawa. Ellen as a decoration consultant for special events, slap it up. And Linda as collector of all things beautiful. Finally, I am enjoying the role of Bubby Ann and observing the creative efforts of my grandchildren, Natalie, Jessica, Benjamin, Amanda, Elliot, and Elisa. Thank you.
I have to talk about this.
Yeah. Okay.
I'll go down, put on.
Ladies and gentlemen, this is the mini biog of Teena Tarantour, who was incapacitated and wasn't able to come this evening. But as a result, Anne has agreed to talk about her sister's work, which is will be over there. I'm not sure whether we should... my sister-in-law. All right. Whether we should move it over. I think so. Stuart, we need some strength. This is heavy stuff. Teena was born in Ottawa in 1939. She received her Bachelor of Nursing from McGill in 1965 and her Bachelor of Fine Arts at the University of Ottawa in 1986. Her favorite material is bronze. Teena has enjoyed many solo exhibitions, including Ottawa City Hall, University of Ottawa, Galerie Lazear and Nepean Civic Square. She's also been in numerous group exhibitions, including the National Council of Jewish Women of Ottawa, the Ontario Society of Artists, Image 81, SCC Permanent Collection, First Canadian Place, Toronto, the Elmwood Art Fair, the Network of Sculptures Dimension, and the Ottawa School of Art. Teena has received numerous commissions and is in many public and private collections, and we really thank you, Anne. Where are you?
I'm over here. I put a sweater on so I look like Teena. I could never look like Teena. No, I'll be fine.
Yeah.
I'll be okay.
Thank you so much.
Good. Hope you'll bear with me. Teena's doing very well. Unfortunately, she couldn't be here tonight. So, it's a pleasure to talk about her work. I could talk about all my sister's works. But I have been asked to do this task, and it is a pleasurable one. As a young child, Teena loved collecting shells and other items. There was always 10 years difference between the two pairs, myself and Selma, and 10 years, and then Sonia and Teena. And sometimes we babysat. But now we're all even. Along the shoreline, and these characteristics are still prevalent in her works today. She loves to collect things and sees beauty in many objects. This piece over here, perhaps you can see it afterwards too, you'll go up to it, is entitled Garden of Delights, in which he has painted many treasures of family heritage, artifacts and souvenirs to correlate with photos and memories. It was originally a printer's drawer in which were kept the letters. She has kept the dark-colored wood. Teena has placed color Xerox transfers on satin material of family photos of our father Morris as a young man with his sisters, Rivka, Bertha, and Ida, and a picture of our mother Sylvia as a young child in Vilna. Our own wedding study with our bridesmaids, one of whom is here, Lily Kardish, and the other one was Sonia Schaefer. Interspersed with these photos are robin and quail eggs, marbles, buttons from her trousseau, reminder of our father's clothing business. There are also mementos from her many trips abroad, bottles from the Orient, the Egyptian goat from Israel, scarabs, beetles, and peacock feathers. Teena made heartwarming boxes of family mementos for the wedding of her children, Eitan and Melanie, Selena and Scott, and her husband Uri's family, and received numerous commissions to do others. And you'll enjoy going up and looking at it. I haven't mentioned it, all the treasures that you'll find in it. Over the years, she has worked in leather, wood, wool, copper enameling, oils, watercolor, marble, bronze, to name a few. Her favorite medium is bronze. The second piece that perhaps you can't see too well from there, but you will, is composed of masks. And look at it afterwards. It's entitled The Vicissitudes or Variations in Bronze. They are abstracted bronze portraits of her daughter's friends. She loves to experiment and stretch the media, and this technique involves many stages. Adhering alginate to a dentist paste to the face of the model, applying gauze bandages, the removal and adding plaster to the form, making a rubber mold, making a wax mold from the rubber ones, sending the wax mold to a foundry, adding additional plaster, melting the wax, and adding melted ore to the cavities therein, removing the plaster and refining the bronze, adding acid for the green or brown coloring, patina, the further polishing to attain the gold shiny surface. As you can see, it takes patience and it takes fortitude. For each step is very critical. Teena is a member of the Ottawa Sculptural Society. One of her large works received the top prize. I have a recent portfolio which she gave me, which is available for your perusal. It itemizes her many, many exhibitions. And some of her work is even in England, in the Queen's possession, her copper enameling. Her creativity is boundless. And like her sisters, Sonia, Selma, and myself, we enter eagerly into each new endeavor. In closing, I do want to mention Selma, whose work can be seen at Hillel Lodge. Her French boudoir dolls and paintings reflect her embroidery skills and her love of pretty things. We are all surrounded by the interest and love of art and find Ottawa a wonderful city to grow up in. Thank you.
Debbie, you don't want this. Okay. Ladies and gentlemen, no one can leave because we've locked the doors. I'm pleased to give the mini biog of Deborah Mirsky Cosman. Debbie was born in Ottawa. She has always had an interest in art and began her studies in drawing and painting with Robert Hyman. Now, according to your information of the JCC, I hadn't been aware that Robert Hyman was at the JCC. I'm not sure if you're aware of the works of Robert Hyman, portrait painter, landscape painter, and of course, the Spitfire pilot of the Royal Canadian Air Force, who was an official war artist as well. Try not to be nervous, Morton. Oh. Debbie also studied with Henri Masson, A.Y. Jackson, and R.W. Walker of Fisher Park. Because Fisher Park at that time was an outstanding, had an outstanding emphasis on the arts. Debbie attended the Ontario College of Art, Toronto, and studied with Duncan de Kergamo at Carleton, as well as Leonard Gerbrandt of the Ottawa School of Art. Debbie has had many solo and group exhibitions and has won many awards. Her works are in collections in Canada, the United States, and Mexico. She's a member of the Ottawa Art Association and is a fellow and past president of the Ottawa Watercolor Society. Ladies and gentlemen, Debbie Mirsky. You wouldn't dare touch the paintings on the easels of the Tarantours that are here. Can I help you, Debbie?
I did bring notes. I was told not to bring notes, and I guess there was a reason I was told not to bring notes, because my notes have just disappeared. So I'll do this off the top of my head. The only reason that I had notes was because when you get up like this in front of an audience, there are things you would like, little stories and things that you would like to say, and if it's not written down, after you sit down, that's when you remember the things that you wanted to say that you forgot to say. But we'll do our best here. When I first started painting, I took an art course out at Kingsmere. And one of the teachers, unfortunately, was very discouraging. And I was sitting outside under the trees trying to do sketches of trees. And that was the first time I ever met Mr. A.Y. Jackson. And he came and sat down beside me. I was in tears. And he put his arm over my shoulder and he said, "What's wrong?" And I said, "I always wanted to be an artist. And I've been told, you can't paint, you can't draw, forget it, you'll never be an artist." Anyway, to make a long story short, many years later, the artist who had discouraged me that day was the only juror at an exhibition at City Hall, and he selected one of my paintings to get the silver trophy and first prize in the watercolor category. So, and I never said anything to him about that, but it really made me feel good. It took many years, but I made it to that point. That same painting, which was titled Gull on a Rock, which I don't have anymore. It's a painting that I'd sold to a friend, and actually the paintings I brought with me tonight are ones that I own myself. I don't like to borrow paintings back just in case I should drop them or something should happen. But that one painting just seemed to bring me so much delight. Well, like I said, a friend came to an exhibition and bought the painting from me, and she had it in her home, and I had a solo exhibition at Accents Gallery, which is an interior decorators on Somerset Street. And I didn't have quite enough paintings to fill the large space that was there, so I did borrow that painting back. 1 week before the exhibition ended, the woman's husband called me up and he said, "Do you mind if I take the painting home now?" And I said, "Well, the exhibition only has 1 more week to go. Would you not like to leave it here?" And he said, "Well, my wife is dying of cancer, and she requested that she have her Gull on the Rock back again to hang over the couch so that she could enjoy it one last time." And believe me, that is the biggest compliment that anybody could pay anyone. My mother was a musician. She played the cello, and she played in many orchestras. And I guess I could say I inherited my artistic abilities and my interest in art through her. Let me see. See, that's what happens when you don't have your notes. The way I feel about a painting is a painting is very much like a symphony. If a symphony needs to be pleasing to the audience, and I feel the same way about a painting. Also, it should have balance and harmony. In design, there should be movement throughout, and the colors as well should present some harmony. In this painting over here, these are the rock sculptures on the Ottawa River, just east of the Champlain Bridge. When I put the small buildings, which are, is that City Hall in Hull? Government buildings in Hull, I also added some of the color down in here, even though that color wasn't really there in the water, but just to balance the painting a little bit better. I'm guilty of working from photographs. The reason I say guilty is because I know Morton doesn't like to work from photographs. But I like my creature comforts. I prefer to work in the studio at home. I won't work from a photograph that I didn't take myself or that my husband Herb took when I was with him. Sometimes I will go back to the site and do a little bit of sketching, as I did with this one. This painting is of an abandoned mill pump in Almont. This was a real challenge for me because I'm not familiar with the workings, and therefore I needed a photograph so that I could sit comfortably at my drafting table and study it carefully. My husband Herb's brother is an engineer, and he came to Ottawa to visit and saw this painting in the workings, and I said to him, "Did I get it right?" And he said, "Well, this will pull on this and that fully works." He said, "Yeah, you got it right." I knew if I didn't get it right, what's happened in the past, when I've taken part in an exhibition, if I happen to be there and watch people walking by, not just with my own work, people will make a comment. If they're very familiar with a subject, and they'll say, "Oh, that can't possibly work." So I'm very careful that way to see that everything is working properly. I put the 2 birds in the painting just to give it a little feeling of life, because after all, this is now abandoned, and just to give it a little softer touch. Very often, if I do a flower painting, I'll put a little bug in or something, just to give it a little more action. In this painting, there is actually a little figure standing on the rock up there, just again to give it a little feeling of life. This painting down here, I'll get it up so you can have a better look at it. This was one of my favorite places, Butchert Gardens in near Victoria, British Columbia. I've done a series on these. This is the last one that I have. I particularly liked the windows because there again, it's introducing a little bit of life. You know, there's not just, the flowers aren't just there. There's a window and a building, and so people have to have come and gone from there. I particularly labored but enjoyed this area because it dances back and forth, and I enjoy doing that. When I paint, I use Chinese brushes, and I brought some brushes with me. This will be sort of a mini studio tour because I couldn't bring my whole studio with me. One of the courses I took in painting was from a Chinese lady, and I just, even though I'm not doing Chinese paintings, I like the feel of these brushes. Now, when they're wet, this is a new one, hasn't been used yet, so you can see that when they're wet, they'll go to the finest point. And as you're painting, if you press a little harder, then the brush will open up and you can get a wider line. I love them particularly for flowers and leaves. I don't use a wash. I don't wet my whole page very often because I like to feel in control, and the minute it gets very wet, the watercolor will run. I'll use wet technique if I'm doing a large area, like a sky, for instance, or an open field. The other thing was I've been influenced by other cultures and other places that we visited. When I did the painting of the rock sculptures on the Ottawa River, the sculptures reminded me of native works. And therefore, when I was painting the water, instead of just doing water, I patterned the water the same way as the natives do. They outline everything, and I love the technique. Because I like to feel in control, I almost work like a computer, I guess you could say. I made a color chart for myself, so there is no guesswork as to, for instance, what the color alizarin crimson looks like when it's dark, when it's light. But I have a separate sheet of paper beside me on my drafting table, and I use that if I want to blend colors together that I haven't done before, because before I touch that paper, which is almost sacred to me, I want to know what's going to happen with the paint. One of the most wonderful experiences I had as an artist was at Ronald McDonald House here in Ottawa. I brought this little album with samples of my work. If you'd like to have a look at it later, I know they're small photographs, it's hard to see. But a friend of mine, Dahlia Kuwaiti, who's an interior decorator, called me up one day and she said that she was asked to submit a design for one of the rooms, she and several interior decorators, and would I like to paint murals on the walls of that room. She gave me a plan of where the furniture was going to go, with the height and width of each piece of furniture, and she showed me the fabric that was going to be used on the bed. Now, the fabric had little lions and almost like coloring books, like a child's coloring books. There's a bug sliding down a leaf. I put that one over one bed. There's a lion leaning like this over a leaf. I put him over the other bed. There's a rabbit hopping along the floor. Then she showed me there was a little table with a light, so I put a bookworm there. That was my own idea. That wasn't on the fabric. While I was working on this project, the building wasn't complete, 100% complete, but the architects and the electricians and the full staff were still there working around, and these gentlemen would come in every once in a while with a little child to see my room. And the children would just get so excited. Anyway, one day I got talking to one of the electricians, and I said to him, I know you're doing this on a volunteer basis, as I was, and I've had such a good time with all the children. He says, well, you know what? Every one of us here who have volunteered our time are doing this because these are our children and they all have cancer. After that, every time somebody would bring a child in, I was moved to tears. But it made the job even more heartwarming. I just felt so good about it. Now, who knows, today it could have, maybe the kids have colored over them, but just to think that I was able, as an artist, to bring a smile to a sick child, with all my work, I hope that it makes people feel pleasant. I don't like to do gruesome subjects, because I want people to feel good about my work. The one thing I brought in tonight, which is different from the others, this is a print. It's not the original. National Council of Jewish Women asked member artists to submit designs for cards. Some of you may have seen those folders with all the different cards. My husband and I had been to Israel that year, and I was impressed with what I'd seen in Israel and thought, well, I'm going to do this type of a theme. And it's the only time I've ever done a painting of Hasidic dancers, but I had such a good time with it, with the motion and the movement. The original painting has more color than this. To have a print made, it was going to be quite costly, so I kept it down to a sepia. But it was a pleasant venture for me. I've had some enjoyable experiences as an artist too. Things that have happened that I'll just tell you a couple of stories. I sold a painting at an auction. It was a painting of a house in Quebec. Many years later, I get a phone call from a gentleman. He said, I don't know if you remember me, but my wife and I were at the auction and we bought the painting of the old house from you. Could you tell me what that painting is worth today? I said, oh, probably more, And I didn't remember what he paid for it then. And I said, why do you want to know? He said, because we're getting a divorce. And we're fighting over articles, and I have to know how much to pay her for your painting. So one never knows what's going to happen to their work after many years. I want to thank you very much for allowing me to speak tonight, and I thank the Jewish Historical Society. I'm really feeling very good about this. It's wonderful to follow the Tarantour sisters because I grew up with them, and I met Teena as a member of the Watercolor Society when she was doing watercolor paintings. I know Sonia through the Watercolor Society because we're both members there. And I remember meeting over the years, and so I met the other girls through Selma because we were very good friends many years ago. And Morton is another story. I had just completed a year at the Ontario College of Art. I had a portfolio in my hand, and I was going door to door trying to get a job as a commercial artist. And the first question I was asked when I got to a doorway was, what experience have you had? I said, I just finished school. Couldn't get a job. When I knocked on Morton's door, he gave me a job. So he gave me my first start, not as a fine artist. I wasn't doing this kind of work, but nevertheless, he encouraged me to paint. And then many years later, I became president of the society, which he founded. So we go, yes, that's it, yes. We go back a long time. If you'd like to see this little album after and see the pictures at Ronald McDonald House, I'll be glad to show them to you. Thank you.
this on you now? You gonna move around?
I think this should be moved. It's okay. Do you have any further words that you want to say?
It's
me? It's my turn. Yeah, okay. Yeah. Yeah. Yeah.
Oh, it's attached.
What do you want to do?
No, I'm fine.
What do you want to do?
What would you like us to do?
I'd like that one moved because I don't want it to get knocked. Ladies and gentlemen, the original concept, which was gone by the boards, was all the paintings were to be facing the wall. But that's all right. I'm not too sensitive. I would like you to know what a scary thing to follow 3-4 other people. Ladies. Yeah. Anyways, there is a line or two that I would like to mention, and that is, since Debbie, I've found my notes.
I think you ate mine.
From earliest recorded history, mankind has always had an insatiable desire to record the human condition, including dress, costumes, religion, and ways of life. We're fortunate to be able to study the earliest cave drawings, the tiniest Inuit carvings, small enough to suit their nomadic traveling while searching for food. To see the religious paintings of the Middle Ages that catered to and influenced the masses who could neither read nor write. Then came the revolutionary invention for duplicating books by Gutenberg and his printing press in the 1400s, which opened the way for the Renaissance and influenced the subject material to now include landscapes and portraiture. In the new world of the Americas, artists suffered the agonies of breaking away from the artistic influences of the Italian, the French, and the British schools, as manifested by the torturous experience of rejection by our own group of 7. And the Americans, of course, had their equivalent. Now, what I would like to do is to share the experiences of this outdoor landscape painter who, interestingly enough, A.Y. Jackson came to my first show with gnarled fingers like this from arthritis. He could hardly hold a brush in his hand because of sitting in the snow. I now sit looking out the window in my motorhome with the furnace on and beer in the fridge. There's no need to suffer. But what you might be interested to know is, and Sheila, this is winging it. Hello. Outdoor landscape painters are intruders on the property of others. And there is a rule of thumb which I believe is very important, especially for a man. You drive up, you get out, you wave, and never have your hands in your pocket because it could conceal a knife or a gun. So what I've learned from my kids, you go like this, it says, hey, you're safe. She's smiling. Hey, you're safe. And no drugs. That's important. In my experience from traveling, coast to coast in all different countries, I believe that there is a story behind every one of my paintings. Like driving in the bowels of Quebec, up a laneway where a huge dog is jumping up with the jaws like this, and out of nowhere, a voice says, "Arrête!" and he closes the jaws. Then he says, in French, "What are you doing here?" So I said, "Je suis un peinture, je dirais la peinture votre barn." He likes it.
No wonder they want to separate.
But you know what he said? Quelle couleur. Quelle couleur. But you know, there are a million stories, and I've brought several, which I think that you might enjoy. In 19 whatever, ding-a-ling-a-ling, I get a telephone call from Rabbi Bulka. I mean, this is the Historical Society. I've got to give you something that's historical. Would you paint the Murray Street Synagogue, which is about to be demolished to widen Murray Street? He said, in exchange for a 2-year membership, for your family. Is Rabbi Bulka here? Good, eh? Now, what is important is the recognition that in terms of, say, the technique of each artist is absolutely different and should be so. Hi, how are you? Yeah, good. I take 100 to 140 hours to do a painting. What is advantageous for me, presuming that you're interested in, let's say, what the approach of this artist is, it gives me a chance to check the sun, which goes from east to west, to determine whether I want a morning painting, a noon painting, or an afternoon painting. And I usually have to stop about 4:30 because the angle of the sun hitting the paper accentuates the bumps in the paper and it distracts me. So in this particular case, you know that this place is still there. This is still there. It knocked the shul down, and it seemed absolutely right to have no people in it because it was gone. It was deconsecrated. I should add that they liked it in this painting, which I call a tribute to an age. A gift from the artist in memory of Lillian Baslaw, that's Sheila's mother, another 2-year membership for the Now I wasn't sure whether I should, because where's that Shirley Berman is watching me. I've only used 6 minutes.
I've got tears in my eyes from laughter.
Here I am. I've got the key. I go into the shul, and it's spooky. And the red light is on, still. What do they call it? The eternal light. I'm painting away, and it's time to go home. So I go and turn out the lights, and what do you think I turn out? And I'm sharing this awesome moment with you. I'm there like this saying, goodbye world. It bothered me so much, I phoned Rabbi Boca and I told him. They will not sell this back to me. The burden. This is a polygapno scene where sequentially, because I only work transparently, I can't paint, let's say, I can't paint this rock until I paint the leaves. Then I paint around the leaves. How else can you use up 140 hours? I do my shadows third last. I do my trees second last. And I do my sky last. But that's my approach. And the thing that might be of interest to you is there are 4 seasons, and I am delighted to be an Ottawan because we really get our 4 seasons. This spring has been ridiculous. Absolutely ridiculous. But spring, from my experience painting, lasts 3 days. 3 weeks. Rather. 3 days, yeah. So the 2 iffy seasons are spring and fall. The ones that last the second longest is summer, maybe, and winter, of course. So the thing that goes through my mind is either unconscious or subconscious. I just think it's subconscious. That you do things by a rote reflex reaction, which I totally don't understand. But you expect, you're challenged by the necessity to determine what's going to change first. As if, for instance, and we're not supposed to say this, Morton, but the City Hall has one of my paintings called First Snow. I went up and I started the painting First Snow. When I went back, it was the 4th snow, so I waited a year. Come back to the first snow, which is important to me. Now, and then then you experience all kinds of things. Like the function of art, in my opinion, it is as important to the painter to be pleased with their work as it is for the patron. The one thing that does bother me is indifference. Like, in other words, if somebody walks by and just, it's like nothing. I would rather people say, I truly don't like it, and then I can learn from it. But from indifference, there's nothing, you know? So, then, some paintings should be considered personal. This is something which is very precious to us, and it's called Tarantour. What happened was it our 40th year or our 41st anniversary? I asked Sheila what she would like because she doesn't like surprises. The only surprise she ever really experienced was me. So she said, well, I would like something that would remind me of my dad. So this is his Russian passport, where I suggested that we take the original and paste it on, and she said no. So I had to write Russian, I had to, don't ask. So there was his passport, and the one thing that personally appealed to me was that was his oil can. I don't know if you've ever seen an oil can like that before. But according to Tarantour, he said that oil couldn't fix it, nothing could. So that was his precious oil can. He dearly loved his wife, Lily. Two earrings, and my mother-in-law loved books. Winding through this is cloth tape measures, and he loved garlic. You know, and many of these tools he actually made himself. So this has become very, very precious to us. So on that happy note, Stuart, ladies and gentlemen, I'm absolutely delighted to see you all, and thank you very much.
This has been quite an eventful evening. I think we have to put all the artists, along with Morton, who is an artist also, in front of you to ask the questions. Now they're dispersed amongst the audience. However, Debbie, have you remembered the other half of your speech? No, okay. Did any of you want to add a quick note to what you've missed? Okay. Are there any questions?
Morton, what happened to all the comic books that the high school student was so busy creating in his non-study time?
Oh my God, you remember. I can remember what I drew when I was 4 years of age.
Really?
Yeah.
Have you any of them?
Nudes.
Hey?
I still have it.
Any questions to the artists? Yes?
I'm an artist, and I'd like to know procedures. Somebody mentioned there was a deal with this and that.
See Morton after.
And I'm also, I'm in Benefit Dilemma, I appreciate your help.
but the one question that was most asked when I was in art school in Chicago was, how much should I charge for my work? And the answer was, as much as you can get.
I was listening to the video center, and I stopped inside the Curry Rossi men's store, and I took a look, and people were looking at me, and I said to myself, these were sales clerks. And I figured I should say something, and I blurted out, "Where's Harry anyways?" And out of the group came a man over to me, and he said, "Oh," he says, "I'm Harry Rosen." So I said, "That's my terrible luck to myself." I didn't say it to him, but I'm an honest person. And I told him, I said, "I have absolutely no reason whatsoever for staying here and meeting you." But I said, "You know, I appreciate your clothes."
You can ask any one of the artists tonight here this evening, they'd be able to tell you how to also. But any other questions? I'll ask you, Dahlia Rosenfeld, you got a big job. Big job now, yes, sir.
Make it good.
I'm going to try, Morton. Ladies and gentlemen, I think to the artists who spoke, to the artists whose work is being demonstrated here, I have only one word to say. Thank you very much. The rapt attention of your audience tonight is an expression of their joy. During the evening tonight, I felt we had a meeting of, if you want to put it this way, of our genes and our environment. And the success demonstrated by the artistry here tonight is not only beautiful, but the words that they gave us tonight, which explains their motivation, their history, their background, adds tremendously to the art that we saw tonight. Thank you. I want to say one or two other things. In thanking the artists here tonight. For the last 3 weeks, people who know me said, "What's the relationship between an art show and a Jewish Historical Society?" And I have to tell you that the history of our people and the history of society is not made up with military wars or founding new territories. It is built up of a series of events that are part of our culture, our background, our religion, our activities, our geography, our language, our successes, and our failures. And part of the Jewish Historical Society of Ottawa is to record these events in perpetuity, if we can. What we have heard tonight is on tape. It will never be forgotten. The history of a Tarantour family is now recorded. Other information is now recorded. And on behalf of the community at large, I want to thank you all and express our appreciation for your contribution to us that are here tonight and to the whole community of today and tomorrow. Mort, on behalf of the society, our society, I'd like to present this to you in honor of yourself and the artists who presented tonight. Thank you very much. Okay?
Ladies and gentlemen, that's it for this evening. Refreshments will be now served in the far corner. Thank you for coming. It was a delight.